Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. King What Is here, and I'm here with part 2 of What If Deku Had the Salamander Fire Spirit from Black Clover. Now, let's start, okay? Before I do, I have a question I want you to think about. Now, if you've watched Black Clover, this is for you. You know how Fauna had the salamander spirit? Well, how do you think events would have turned out, like in the Witch's Forest arc, if she didn't have salamander? Imagine her riding on a broom, and then, I just want to know how everything would turn out if she didn't have salamander. And also, how come Fauna didn't have salamander? I would keep salamander, I meant. Anyway, let's start. Where we last left off, Deku's at a government facility base, sort of like the same one that Hawks was at, as they just make a deal with the government. 2 days later, Midori would go to school. Going to school, Salamander would come out of Midoriya's book bag or like materialize himself, because it is because spirits they hide it. The spirits go in the user's grimoires and Black Clovers, and since there's no grimoires in this world, since there's no grimoires in this world, he can't really, go inside Midori's grimoire. So he just uses his body. Also, Salamander collects mana with Midoriya's body. But now let's continue. Bako would go to Midoriya, pushing him, saying, "It's because of you I got this burn mark. The doctor says it won't heal for a few months. This is all your fault," Bako would say, pushing Deku. And Salamander would grow to size, looking like this, but it wouldn't be that big since they are in a classroom. Bako would back up in fear as Salamander would go back to size as kids would start petting him. After that, Midoriya would go to his government facility. The government facility where he would train. They would call in a pro hero. His name was Yuno. And luckily he also did have one of the spirits too. Sylph spirit, wind spirit. He also did have a wind type quirk. As Yuno would just help Midoriya learn some things. Now time skip to the beginning of the anime. Alongside with this time skip, since Midoriya doesn't have mana, he can't use his spirit drive. He can't use his spirit dive for like a long time like Yuno can. Okay? Since he doesn't have mana. I mean, Yuno can't even use it for that long too. But since there's no mana, I'm just saying, like, like only they have mana. So he can't use, like, Yuno can use his spirit drive like unlimited, I think, or at least a long time. But Asta, I mean, for Deku right now, only 10 minutes. Anyway, during this time, Midoriya would again learn Spirit Drive, the first stage of Spirit Drive. He would also learn Salamander's Breath. No, he would also learn Salamander's Breath, Salamander's Claw, Talon. He would also, get. He would also enhance his own quirk as itself too, and just yeah. Now, now we get to the beginning of the anime. A young built boy who has good muscles, like after 10 months training, is running. Dang it, how could I oversleep? He'd say, talking on his shoulder. While running, he'd see a giant villain, as there'd be two pro heroes debuting. As the two pro heroes would take down the other heroes, as Midoriya would be taking notes. "Shouldn't you be going to class, kid?" a random dude beside him would say, as Midoriya would say, "Oh yeah." Midoriya, Midoriya would go to class. The teacher would walk in. "As third-year students, you guys should be thinking about what you want to do for your future." As the teacher would smile, throwing the papers up in the air. "I know y'all want to go down the hero course," the teacher would say, as everybody would show off their quirks, as Midoriya would just be writing in his notebook with one of his hands raised. Settle down. No authorized quirk users at school," the teacher would say. Bako would go on saying how he wanted to go to UA, as the teacher would then say how Midoriya wanted to go to UA too. Bako would be angry, still angry at Midoriya, not because of the burn mark, just because Bako angry would slam his hand on Midoriya's desk. Midoriya would have been used to it. His training was hard and he's used to working with fire, so that didn't really scare him as he'd just keep writing down his notebook. Bako would say, "You think you can get to UA? Why would they have you when they could have me?" Midoriya would say, "You don't know for certain that you'll get into UA, or that I'll get into UA, so I think we should just wait and see." As Bako would be mad as he'd raise his hand as the teacher would tell Bako to sit back down. He didn't want to get another detention. As Bako would sit back down, not wanting to get in trouble. After school, Bako would take Midoriya's notebook. Taking Midoriya's notebook and exploding it, throwing it out the window. Midoriya would get mad, creating a small fire in his hands, but would decide not to. He didn't want to get in trouble. Midoriya would go outside as he'd say, "Come on, Salamander, let's go." As he would fly Salamander home, completely avoiding the sledge incident. Midoriya would decide to go back and train over the next 10 months, just increasing his power and everything. 10 months would go by as Midoriya would be walking to UA. All walking to UA, he'd see Bako. "Move it, nerd," Bako would say. Midoriya would just walk in front, not tripping this time. As he'd sit down, Midoriya wouldn't actually, talk that loud as he would have already reviewed the test a long time ago. They would go their separate areas as Midoriya would be ready wearing a tracksuit. Midoriya would call Salamander out. Midoriya would call Salamander out. As Salamander would be out, President Mike would say, "Go, what are you doing? There's no countdown to the real battle," President Mike would say as the examinees would go. Midoriya and Salamander would split up. Midoriya thought that any points Salamander got should have gone to him, as they would split up. Salamander would see a robot as he'd shoot fire at it, completely burning it. Meanwhile, as he'd just keep on going on a rampage, destroying robots left and right. Meanwhile, Midoriya would see robots as he would shoot fireballs at it, destroying the legs first, as Midoriya would run behind the robots, turning them off. Midoriya created a giant fireball as he'd see multiple robots, throwing it at the robot as the robots would explode, getting lots of points. Midoriya and Salamander would keep destroying robots, getting way more points. At the end, Midoriya would probably have about 81 points due to Salamander and him actually having a good quirk. Midoriya would be tired. As he would fall down as his weak knees. As there'd be an explosion, as everybody would look forward to see that there was a giant 0-point robot. It was coming. Midoriya wouldn't be frozen in fear, but he'd see that there was a girl under. He would call Salamander back, as Salamander would rush. Rushing, Midoriya would go into Spirit Drive, as the 0-point robot would go to step on a girl. Midoriya would fly up to the face of the 0-point robot, as he would shoot a giant fireball at the head, knocking off the first plate, as Midoriya would fly through the robot, pushing it down. Midoriya would then fly down, taking the rubble off of the girl, as he'd ask if she was okay. Uraka would say she was okay and thank you, as Recovery Girl would come and check on Uraka, seeing that she was okay. Also something, I was thinking of describing the Spirit Drive, but you think about how the Spirit Drive is. Like, use your imagination how it looks like. Anyway, Midoriya would then go out of Spirit Drive as they were going to go change. In the changing room as he'd change. After changing, Midoriya would then go home. A week later, he'd get a letter. It'd be All Might, as the All Might figure would explain that Midori got the top score, about 81 points and 66 rescue points, getting about around 130 points. I did not want to add that up. But anyway, yeah, getting around 130 points. Midori would say, All Might would say, Midori would be happy as he'd go up telling his mom the good news as they would go, and Inko would make him something to eat. Another week later, Midori would be called into school with Bakugo, as the principal would be congratulating both of them. Midori would say, so I guess we both made it, Bakugo, as Bakugo would growl, walking away angrily. Midori still couldn't ever understand why Bakugo was so mad at him. But it didn't matter. Midori would go home. Another week later, Midori would go to UA as he'd walk in through the doors. He'd walk in seeing a giant door. Why is it so big? Midori would think to himself. As he didn't say, there are multiple people with gigantic face quirks, so maybe that's just for that. He'd walk in and see a few people there. Midori had took the short route and just flown to UA. Probably should have gone on the subway so in case he needed to get back. He'd walk in as he'd sit down. More and more people would walk into the class until Bakugo would walk in. Midori would say, oh, Bakugo, we're in the same class. Bakugo would completely ignore Midori, sitting in front of him, taking off his jacket and putting his feet on the desk. As Ida would walk in, he'd scold Bakugo a little before noticing Midori was behind him. He'd go ask, how did you know that there was an extra, preliminary in the entrance exam? Midori would say he didn't. He just rescued the girl because that's what a hero would do. Meanwhile, the same girl that they were talking about would come in. She'd make her way over, introducing herself. As she'd say, "Hi, I'm Ochako Araka. Thank you for saving me." Midori would say it was okay. Any hero would have done it, and she probably wouldn't have been crushed. Ojo Araka would say, "Yeah, but," as they'd be stopped, as Mr. Aizawa would be there. Mr. Aizawa would say, "If you're here to make friends, go home." He would tell them that they were going to do an exam as the class would wonder about the opening ceremony. Mr. Aizawa would say, if you want to do that, then you might as well leave, because heroes don't need that. As the class would change, going outside, as Mr. Aizawa would tell Midori to throw the ball as far as he can. Midori would wrap the ball in his fire, waiting. A minute would go by. Mr. Aizawa would say, are you going to throw it? Midori would say, I am, just waiting. As it'd come, Midori would see a bird in the sky as he'd throw it. The ball covered in fire would aim towards the bird. As it'd almost be close to hitting the bird, Midori would stop it, as the bird would see it moving out the way. 300 meters, Mr. Aizawa would say, as the class would be astonished. Midori would go back in class as Mr. Aizawa would think, his quirk, heat-seeking and salamander. He used his heat-seeking quirk he wrapped the ball around his fire as he threw it at a bird that he was heat-seeking tracking. As he got close, he turned off his quirk. That was very smart. The rest of the matches would go the same. For the race, Midori would go into Spirit Drive, getting a good score on that. Sit-ups, Midori would do good. Side-to-side steps, Midori would do good on that too. Grip strength tests, Midori would do amazing. Standing long jump, Midori would get on Salamander, as Salamander would jump high in the sky. At the end, Midori would end up getting third place, just behind Todoroki and before Bakugo. Bakugo would be furious as he'd go to attack Midoriya. Salamander would pop out as he would shoot a wall of fire in front of him. Mr. Aizawa would block. Mr. Aizawa would use his binding cloth to capture Bakugo. As he told Bakugo if he did that again, he was expelled. At the end of the exam, no one would get expelled and everything would be normal, as it was just a logical deception. As Midori would be going home, he would decide to want to fly home, as he'd be stopped by Tenya Ida, and then by Uraraka. They get to know each other, and Midori would just decide to walk to the station. There might be a day when he needs to walk to the station. He can't always fly on Salamander, he'd say. And that's where I'm leaving this part off. If you enjoyed, do whatever you want. Anyway, bye, I guess.